Okay, so now that we've seen the form container element, the wrapper element, let's talk about what goes inside or what can go inside a form. The most common element, the most common form control, though there are some others we'll cover, is the input element. So the input element is extremely versatile. We can use it to make 20 plus different inputs. So that could range from a checkbox to a color picker to a date picker to a password input to just a plain old text input. And the way that this works is the exact same element, input, but we change one attribute called type. And type is going to dramatically alter how it behaves. So I'll show you some examples. Here is the input documentation on MDN. The first thing you should know is that input is another example of an element that does not have a closing tag. There's no content between two tags. So if you look at how we use it, scroll down a bit more. It's quite the long page. Here you go. Here's an example. Just input. There's no closing tag. There's no content in between. And the most important attribute, as I've mentioned, is this one called type. But before we do that, let's head over to our HTML document, forms.html. I think my cat stepped all over my keyboard. Let's delete all of that. We've got our empty form, and let's add a single input, just like that. So technically this is a valid input, even though we didn't specify what type. I believe it defaults to a text input. As you can see here, I've got a text input, and that's part of my form. Now, what I'm usually going to do is specify type equals text. It's a lot clearer what we're working with. We won't really notice a difference at all. It's still a text input. But now let's play around with a couple different types. So I'm just going to duplicate this a couple different times. We have text as our first one. Why don't we try, how about password? That's another very common input where the text inside is actually obscured. So password, we'll refresh. And this second one is our password input. This one is our text input. So I'm sure you've seen these quite a bit in the wild. We just took a look at one earlier. It's exactly the same element, just one difference in the type attribute. So why don't we take a look at something even more different? How about, let's go with a color input. So let's do that here, type equals color. Probably won't use this one very often, but this gives us a color picker. Look at that. By the way, the color picker itself and the inputs will probably look different depending on the browser you're using. You can style these, you can change them, but the browser has some defaults for what they look like. So there's a color picker. What else? We're not going to deal with file pickers at the moment. We've got a month input. Don't use that very often. A number input. So this is just like a regular, it looks like a text input, except I can't type letters in here. I can type numbers, and I can use the arrow keys. I'm hitting up and down arrow to increment and decrement my number, and I can click on this right there, do the same thing. So let's get one of those going here. Number, refresh. There's our number inputs. And let's also do, how about time? You can do that. It's a time picker. You can also type the time in there yourself. We've got a week input. I don't think I've ever used that in my life. And we'll come back and talk about some of these odder ones like a radio and a range and a checkbox. Not that they're odd in a bad way, they're just different. I'm going to cover those in a separate video. I'll group them together. So that's the basic idea of input. Very versatile. I mean, 4 pretty different types of inputs already, and that's just a small subset of them. But there are other attributes aside from this type attribute that we should cover. And one of the most important is something called placeholder. Placeholder is an attribute that will specify the placeholder text for an input, which is the text that shows up before we've typed anything or while it's empty. So for my text input, what is this input supposed to be? Let's say it's a username. I want you to type your username in. I'll refresh, and we see username, but then as soon as I type, my content wins, and we don't see the placeholder. So it's just a placeholder. Now, it doesn't work for every single input. For example, a color input, I don't think you can add a placeholder. On a password input, it is helpful just to specify this is password, or you can do something like enter your password. It just shows up there until you start typing. And we've got a number input, same thing, placeholder equals, enter a number. And there you go. Okay, So placeholder, very important, just in terms of making sure people know what to type into your inputs. However, it's still not super accessible, and we don't have something that we definitely need, which are labels. We will talk about that in the next video, how we properly label these inputs, and there's a couple of reasons why that's important. But for now, what we've seen is that using just one input element and changing that one type attribute, we can get quite a variety of different types of inputs or different form controls. Okay,